Hello and welcome to a special piece of content where we've brought along RyanCentral to do one of the pieces which actually you've kind of invented. And if you're interested in seeing more of this content, once you watch a bit more of the video, you can check it out by going to Ryan's channel, which we'll link in the description. But essentially the idea, Ryan, is that we're picking like star teams and not just like the best possible teams, but there's got to be some fun limitations in it. I believe in previous ones, it was like best team of the tournament. So it was like you had to pick one player from each role that you thought had done the best in whatever the tournament was. And this one, we are deciding to do Masters, but a weird version of Masters. We're not just doing North American Masters.
Yeah, we're doing it so we can only pick one player from each region as well, which makes things super interesting. But yeah, like previously we did stuff, or I did stuff. I'm so used to saying we because of HitScan, but like generally speaking, it was just the end of Challenges 1 for Europe. I'd have like somebody like Hypoc or Mitch on to basically talk about players that don't get an awful lot of credit, right? There's a lot of roles that kind of go a little bit unappreciated, so it's a good opportunity to highlight, you know, that A Proto had an insane tournament at one point and stuff. And I guess as well, you kind of go down at the end of the year, see whose name keeps cropping up, and you've got a nice list of the best players of 2021 as well. But yeah, this is so much of a flagship. I think you guys like suggested the idea on like the co-streams as well. So
yeah, we did.
It's ambitious.
Because it's such a cool idea to say, what is the best team of Masters, like the best players and like a super team of the whole of Masters around the world. The problem is, once you limit yourself to one player from each region, for starters, which 5 regions do you even pick? I think most people would say there's like 4 major regions in Valorant. There's EU, there's NA, there's Brazil, there's Korea. Once you get outside of that, it's like, do you rate Turkey or CIS higher? Do you rate LATAM higher? Do you think Japan is really good? Australia actually just sent a team over to North America as well. Yeah. So you could have picked up a player from that. I guess that would be kind of cheating. You're like double dipping from NA, but they've only just made the move over, so I think they would still count as Australian. But yeah, you end up with very wonky teams.
Yeah, and you get unique styles as well. Like off the bat, like we've got the flex pick in there that I've noted down, because usually we tend to have a double duelist lineup when people go through this, but we've actually immediately conflicted because you've gone like the one duelist typical European style, and I've gone for double duelist. So it makes it super, super interesting off the bat. And like I said, when you see these two names come up and it's these two teams, it'd be a hell of a show match, I can tell you that much. But usually we start with like the Killjoy and the Cypher when we do these kind of things. And I guess I kind of want to throw out mine first because it sets the precedent, maybe. And I hope people don't take this as an insult for the region as a whole, but I've actually put Douglas Apper on the Cypher role, which of course means I can't include people like Tens or Shazam or Sick. But I think if you're actually looking at Masters 1, it'd be almost insulting to not pick anybody from Sentinels, considering how well they did. Obviously, the narrative of Tens going into it as well seemed untouchable. But I think considering how there were times through challenges where people were calling for Dapper and Zombs' heads, from both of them, it was a really good glow up. And I think Dapper is one of the more iconic ciphers in the world with how unique he plays the game, how he takes and cherry picks bits and pieces from all over the world. But his own playstyle is so his own and not like copying anybody else. So he's a pioneer in that sense, maybe.
Yeah, I'm a big Dapper stan, actually. I'm a big fan of the guy. I rate him extremely highly across the entirety of the world. There aren't many other ciphers that play as actively, where he will go and secure map control for you and take areas of the map, and he contributes very actively to his team on both attack and defense, which I think is a massive asset for his team. Shall I reveal my pick now then? Because mine is in a very different direction. Because the thing is, while I do think that Dapper's a fantastic pick, the way that I went about this instead is that I have my 4 major regions that I'm really hot on. Like, I know a lot of the players in those 4 regions. The 5th player, I was like, bro, I don't know where to get this guy from. Yeah. Like, where do I even get this guy from? But I will say that even though nobody watches this region, I have been paying a little bit of attention to CIS over the course of its like development within the scenes ever since it split away from Europe. And one of the teams I was paying attention to, because they were very highly rated by playing scrims against the top European teams, was Gambit. And Gambit haven't really achieved anything in the past. They've constantly, even though they've been hyped up as like this CIS super team, they've never really accomplished their goals up until recently, when Gambit actually won with their roster at Masters, and they beat Forza, who have been, I think Forza have probably been the best team in CIS. Now, I got to say, I'm not an expert on the region, but so I delved into Gambit, who I have actually watched a bunch of their games, more so than any of the other CIS teams. And I was like, okay, I remember these guys. I remember they've got some cracked out duelist players, but my duelist roles are all full up. So instead, I'll select their Cypher, Nats, who I must admit, haven't watched a huge amount of. We're starting off on a weak foot here, but I don't think we're starting off on a weak player. And this is going to open up the rest of my team to select the creme de la creme from the other regions too. But I really rate how the European ciphers play. I think that people like Dimasic, for example, had a fantastic tournament. He came out of the CIS scene, and I think Nats is a somewhat similar caliber of Cypher, where he plays a ton of Cypher, not that much Killjoy. He's quite active. His fragging is extremely good, and he's just had a fantastic result in Masters with his team winning over in CIS. So I'm gonna add him to my superstar roster.
I think Gambit is possibly one of the most underrated teams in the world. Like, the chance of them getting to Iceland is just so difficult in itself, because for those that don't know, so for Europe now with Turkey and CIS, all of the teams go into a Challengers final, which is what Masters was before, but I won't get too much into that because it gets super confusing when it's like, oh yeah, what Masters was before is now a Challengers final. Basically, you have the top 8 teams, 4 of which are from Europe, 3 of which are from Turkey, and 1 CIS team makes it into the finals. 2 of those teams go to Iceland. So there's 1 chance from 1 CIS team to go through. And I think that if Gambit actually make it that far to get to the finals, I think they're a surefire in for the top 2, because this is a team that there's a lot of these. Team Envy is also very similar in North America. When it comes to scrim books and how good they are in scrims, there's a lot of teams in Europe. I've been watching and keeping an eye on Honk, for example. They've invited me to their scrims to watch them play up against teams like Team Gambit. And a lot of these teams are just so good in scrims, but they really struggle to actually move that over into official
They have
games.
a very young team.
Yeah.
Gambit is an extremely young team. I think the average age is probably somewhere around like 19. I don't know for sure, but they're really young. So, yeah, that might factor into it too.
That too. But it's like speaking to Tanny from Heretics, Doombros, Emil, Sleggy, they will all say the same things. Gambit is nuts in scrims. They have a really high win rate in scrims, but of course scrims doesn't mean everything. But now we're starting to see that translate to a win in their region against another really good team, Forza. It's one to keep an eye on, because now they're starting to develop and be a real freight train going forward. I know all of this because I also have a Gambit player in my team, but we'll get on to that in a second. Now I kind of want to move on to the Omen/Brim position for you, because it's more of a familiar name than the first one, to say the least, for you.
Yeah, so the name that I'm going to go with is Angel. I think I have been such a fan of Angel since the beginning of his success in the game, playing with Party Parrots. But all throughout his career in Valorant, it has felt like he's been a revitalized player. If you haven't been paying attention to Angel in Valorant and you think of just like his history in CS and how he tailed off towards the end, Wyatt keeps bringing this up. It feels like he's found the fountain of youth. It feels like he's supped on its sweet, sweet nectar, and he's just straight back to being a cracked out 10-year-old again. 10-year-old? 18-year-old? I've never seen a 10-year-old be good at this game, but they're probably really good. But more generally speaking as well, I think that when I look at the Omen and Brim and just generally smoker quality in all of the Masters regions, my eyes do tend towards Europe. I think the Omen play there is much better. I think a lot of the players have more versatility in what they play too. They sometimes bring out the Brim. A lot of Brim comps, very popular on Bind. Viper getting played too at times, very popular on Bind, very popular on Icebox too. So another name that I was thinking about was Bone Cold as well, because that guy kind of popped during a 7th run. Yeah, he really did. Nowhere. And I think that's what kind of played into me not going for him, or somebody like, Avova would have been up there as well. But Angel is so consistent and has been for ages, and still had a fantastic tournament here. I think FPX are still one of the best teams in EU by a long shot. I think he's a fantastic IGL for my team as well, despite the fact he won't speak the same language as any of the other people, apart from my NA pick, I guess.
They'll find words in between.
He could communicate with Nats maybe, because he has played in CIS teams before. I don't know what language he speaks.
Well, I guess that's one of the other reasons why the whole CIS thing, I think, is not so much a farce. That sounds a bit mean, but I think that it's a region that has been shafted on more than Europe in some cases. And Europe has been shafted on a lot because
it's hard to do.
There's so many players, Dimasic, Chihuahua, Jadi, all from this one region. You've got up-and-coming players like Spellful, who I think is on Singularity maybe, who's like 16, 17. He played in a school tournament that I casted the end of last year, and he's also playing at the top pro scene in CIS. Like, there's a lot going on there. You've even got Simple kind of going, maybe if Astralis put together a team, I'd consider it in Valorant. So I think when it comes a region with a lot of unsung talent, you could also say Turkey as well, but that's why I think Europe is looking so exciting going into the future. Not only the greater European teams, but CIS have a lot of up-and-coming people, and I just love the fact that Angel as well is like, I like to basically int because I can call better when I'm dead. But he also gets a kill. Yeah. Like, he's always good for one, even when he's just on holding W.
Yeah, his entering is actually fantastic. His first bullet accuracy when he's trying to get into areas is fantastic. It's so good for his team.
I mean, for my Brimstone, this is a player that, I'll be honest, I haven't watched a super huge amount of. I think for both Korea and Brazil, they've been on the back burner because, you know, Europe is obviously my main focus. I did a lot of stuff for Nerd Street for North America. But I think this is one of the players that really caught my eye first, and he's not a typical name that you would bring up when you think of Vision Strikers, and that being Glow. I think that you've got a really aggressive Brimstone Omen player with Angel. But what I like with Glow is that he almost anti-lurks with his lurks. I like that when he plays centrally on maps like Split, he won't push super aggressively to catch them out. He's much more like patient. His timing's really good, if a little bit on the later side. But I think it just sort of fits into what Vision Strikers do so well. And yeah, I've really enjoyed watching New Turn start to come up to be proper competition for Vision Strikers. But I mean, if you don't have a Vision Strikers name on this sort of list for Korea, then you're going to be lost at this point. I mean, there's like Allow and Suggest from New Turn that are looking really good. Yeah, they're very good. I think, I mean, I know that you've got a Vision Strikers player on your list and stuff, but I think that not many people mention the likes of Glow and King, especially when it comes to how integral they are on their roles. And you could probably fawn over Glow much more than I can, but certainly watching the finals, the original best of two game between New Turn and Vision Strikers, Glow is just so good at playing the map, and it all seems to revolve around him.
He is the IGL for their team, actually, so that does make sense too. He's one of the most long-standing players on the team. I think he has a long history playing with like MVP, whatever that team was, actually, in former CS titles too. He's been a very long-standing player at the top of the Korean scene. So yeah, he's going to be great at IGLing your team in full Korean. Yeah.
I mean, Dapper better get the Duolingo installed, because this is going to be a hell of a team. So what about so we have a bit of a flex pick where I've picked a duelist, you've picked a breach, but before then we'll go on to the Sova, because you always kind of need a Sova. Sure. Who is it for you?
For me, I thought this was quite an easy choice, actually, because when I think of the best Sova players in the world, like the most cracked out Sova players, my brain immediately goes to Brazil, because there's two Brazilian Sova players who are just bonkers. There's the player for Vikings, and then there's the player for Furia as well. And I went with the player from Vikings, the player that actually won the tournament. That was Sassy, and he is a beast. He plays not just the Sova, but he also picks up the Sky for them when they play Split sometimes too, which was excellent. Sassy's Sky was fantastic as well. But they recently won the entirety of Brazilian Masters, 3-0 win over Gamelanders. Sassy's stats and his just aim in the server is unbelievably good. His feel for the game and how fast the Brazilian teams play, and like his ability to still get a huge amount of value whilst playing a character that's supposed to stay alive quite a lot, is phenomenal. And it's not like he's trading his life to be able to get this value. He's still able to play smartly and just win rounds for his team with an enormous amount of consistency. So yeah, I went with Sassy. I think he's a freak. He's also, by the way, the first ever player, as far as I'm aware, to win a MOBA championship and now an FPS championship. Oh. Because he was a former League of Legends player and won Brazilian major tournaments, and then moved over to Valorant, and now he's won a Brazilian major Valorant tournament with the most recent Masters.
Was he the one that had the headshot series on? There was a little bit of a Riot documentary about it. It might be him or somebody else, I'm not too sure, but
gotta be honest, don't know. Didn't watch it.
There were so many of them, to be fair, across all of the regions. I think for Sova players, it's quite difficult and nuanced to spot the impact that some of them can have. I mean, you can sort of look at them and how they frag out, but it's the more small stuff. It's the nuance, how they play certain positions. I think Artis for First Strike in 2020 was the GOAT. Maybe not so much now with how G2 have fallen off a little bit, but you know that the impact is still there. This is where my Gambit player comes in, because speaking to coaches and pros that scrim against Gambit, there's one name that keeps coming up, and that's Chronicle, as being just one of the nuttiest players. And again, it was one of those ones where you want to sort of keep an eye on it, and certainly looking through the stats. He's got an insane amount of like KD and ADR on such an integral role. But also, he has a huge amount of assists as well. He plays Breach on Split and does a lot of impact there. And I just feel that, again, this is a team that doesn't quite get the impact or the credit that you maybe sort of expect from a region like this. BBL is going to have a lot of hype around it from winning Turkey and just how well known it is in the Turkish scene. Because not only is CIS kind of a region that the West isn't really paying much attention to, but anybody, because it's getting 2K views at most, it comes as no surprise that they kind of go under the radar a little bit. And also, when we did see CIS teams playing in more European tournaments, I think of like the We Play one, Forza, for example, in that tournament, were awful. They went out like straight away and just paled in comparison to the teams now. This is different, but we haven't seen these teams play in a proper tournament. I mean, the most we saw was like Fubalist in that home ground tournament for Red Bull. That's kind of been it with the translate over. So Chronicle is a mechanically gifted player. He's insane with the shots that he can hit, but also the fact that he can be that nutty with the aim and also fulfill a role and set his team up, as opposed to just kind of running in and gunning and setting himself up like some other Sovas do. I'll play super late like Hiko. He is like a nice sort of hybrid playstyle, just seems to be, you know, hitting the gold mark every single time. And so very unappreciated. It wouldn't surprise me if like people don't really know much about Chronicle or Nats because of the CIS region, but I think Gambit, if you want to sort of keep up to date with who could possibly go to Iceland who isn't from the major region of Europe, I think you're looking at BBL and you're looking at Gambit, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, those are the two teams. I would also say like maybe Forza or Footballist, depending if they get, you know, there could be shakeups in some of the minor regions. But yeah, those are the teams that you were looking at most recently, for sure.
I still find it crazy. Like, I like Turkey, and I think they've got 3 good teams that could do well in the final. But I would have just preferred to see it 2-2, right? Like, that's my perspective.
It does make more sense, but Turkey also has a huge amount of viewership that I'm sure they want to tap into, whereas CIS, nobody is watching.
It's a CSGO sort of place in the world.
It
still
is, yes.
It'll get there, but
it is.
There's talent still there, which is better than most in some cases. Right, this is where we differ in sort of what we've chosen, but I think when you mention your pick, people will understand why.
Yeah, so I'm going to go for a Vision Strikers player who I believe, I think he's the best player in Korea, which is why I went for a Breach instead of a Duelist as my like flex role here. So I've gone with Stacks from Vision Strikers. And the reason that I think he's the best player, whenever I watch him, he has some of the best rifling in the scene, and that is At times, he looks even better than people on his own team, like RB, like the main duelist player for the team, or people like Allow, for example, who are playing for Newturn. Like Stax is able to generate massive value with his gunplay, but he's also so smart. I mean, this guy wrote the book on Breach. He genuinely did. Everybody copies what he did on Breach. And now he's starting to transition over to Sky, which they're getting a moderate amount of value from. But let me tell you, Ryan, if he's playing on my team, motherfucker's playing Breach. He's playing Breach. We might experiment with some Sky. We might. But in all likelihood, he's playing Breach for this team. And I think that the strength of Korea in my head as well is not really their aim or their ability to do crazy stuff. It's their structure and it's their thought process that they've put in and their preparation and their server time. And I think Stax embodies all of that because everything he does has a plan and everything that his team does is based on his setup. Or at least that was the case when I think Vision Strikers were at their peak, somewhere between like the end of First Strike and opening time of Masters. So yeah, that's who I've gone for. I was also considering getting like somebody like Shadow for this role as well, because I think Shadow had a fantastic event at Masters. And the guy was playing a lot of Sky as well. But at the end of the day, yeah, I couldn't justify not picking European players on other roles. So I had to go for this one.
And it's one that makes sense because you're right. He pioneered the role, much like others have done in other regions. Breach is still very much an underappreciated agent in some parts of the world, at least. But I think the thing that makes Stax is the fact that he's so selfless with how he uses that utility as well. I think there are a lot of people that play Breach to flash onto a site, and again, kind of what I said about Silver, to set themselves up a little bit. It's very hard to do on Breach because of the whole equip time, but you will see a lot of Breaches just kind of, again, smeag their way onto a site, just trying to follow along with the rest of their team, but just flashing. The fact is that when you see an outline of Stax on the attack, you just see Breach's arm in the air, ready to flash at every given. The fact that he has to flash up like 90% of the time tells you everything you need to know about how Stax plays. It's never about him winning the duels, which he can do, or getting a lot of frags. He is always there to try and set up the team and puts flashes in the most insane positions. I think there's a lot of people, like you would have seen Vision Strikers would be the Korea team going to Iceland, but I do think there's a lot of people that kind of go, Vision Strikers are good, but they're just going to get run over by North America and Europe. I feel like Vision Strikers been scared a little bit by Newturn will do a lot for them. I think it would have done more if they had actually lost to get that fire lit under their asses to an extent. But I feel like what you said about the foundations, the fundamentals, that discipline is going to go a long way against teams that might kind of panic a little bit when they actually have to face up against Vision Strikers on an island in the middle of the Atlantic for the first time in God knows how long. I think this is a team that punishes it. And they also played on land themselves, which I think is a huge advantage to them going forward. So I do agree with that one. I don't think I need to sort of intro my guy too much when it comes to what he did on the Jett, my European pick. I mean, CNED, of course. I think the thing that sells it for CNED is this is a player that's had the potential for eons. Ever since he was on BBL and played in like the Allied Esports tournament, I think it was. Back in the best of 2 days where they qualified for the open qualifiers.
That was an awful, that was an awful tournament format.
The issue, though, has always been, like, I remember CNED getting people's attention for the open qualifiers because he just dumped on everybody. But when he got into the actual part of the event, playing up against Liquid, FPXG2, he was not in the server. He was gone. And that was just a common thing for CNED, even on Nolpenki. Would always do well with the open qualifiers. Then when a game was broadcasted or we got to the first strike finals, we just didn't really see that level of impact that people know that he has. I think the whole Nolpenki team had that problem. And realistically, when you look at the players now of Vac, Jesmond as well, which I think is going to Vitality now, you kind of go, this team probably should have done a lot better. And MBS as the coach who was with Ascend now.
Yes.
You kind of go, I know this team was unsigned and it was really difficult and there was a lot of competition, but this Nolpenki team was much better than people gave it credit for. And
it always had the talent.
Yeah, we just never saw that translate. And I think that's the thing about CNED. Of course, the big question is going to be whether that continues going forward. It would be amazing to see CNED have another great stage 2 of Masters and challenges and all that, but the likeliness is we do see him dip off a little bit. He has to deal with his own mental demons, it feels, but there is a world-class, best-in-the-world player beneath it. It's just whether we see that on a consistent basis that has me interested.
He may have been the best player in all of Masters in all regions. I think that the performance he had over the course of that tournament, he didn't actually top the charts when it came to like ACS in all regions. So I'm not saying that there's a statistical argument for that. But when you look at the impact he had in the server and what he was able to do for his team and to disrupt his opponent's teams and the manner in which they won Masters, I think there's a strong argument that he was the most important or impactful player throughout the entirety of the Worlds during Masters. And I was gutted that I didn't include him on my team, actually. But I just, in order to include him, I felt like I would have had to mess up all the rest of my team in order to do that. And I already had like a vision in my head of how I wanted to achieve it. But yeah, I mean, CNED was a beast. The other people as well, by the way, well, actually, you might take them for your other duelists. So I'm not gonna talk about other great duelist picks yet because you still have another one to go through.
I think I could be really short on mine because this is probably the one I'm less certain about for obvious reasons. Okay. This guy wasn't on the winning team in Brazil, but he is the first name that you'll think of when you think of this region. And probably one of the weirdest names we've ever seen in esports with MW0. The reason why I wanted to include him is even though we saw Gamelanders not really get as far as they maybe could have in this tournament, because there's so many amazing teams in this region. Again, this is probably, when you look at the major regions as you described it, the one I'm least certain about because of the time, but I think when you have CNED on your team with all of the things I said about inconsistency being a bit of a burden, even with Gamelanders going out early, MW0 still had insane stats, and he is the embodiment of consistency on that raise, more so than anywhere else in the world when you're looking at the stats. So I do think that if CNED doesn't perform, you always know that MW0 is going to put in a bit of a shift, hence why I put him at least. But this is one where there could be other raises in the region. Like, I could have just gone through VLR.gg, gone, all right, who's the Vikings raise? What are the stats? All right, I pick him, but I feel like looking at what MW0 did in his games, even though they lost in the semis, they still, he did in particular, put in a really solid performance, and you would expect that going into the future too.
Yeah. I mean, they made it to the finals. Sorry, I'll just correct that slightly. But other than that, I think you're bang on the money. I mean, MW is a freak of a player, a literal, unholy, inhuman freak of a player. When I was saying that CNED was not statistically the best player of Masters across all regions, even though I thought he might have been the most impactful, MW is the statistical best player across all regions as far as I'm aware. The guy was just a boss. And even in the games that he lost, like even in the final that he lost, there's no sense in that he underperforms. Like, I've just pulled up the stats for it to remind myself as well. He went 67 and 57 plus 10 while his team's losing 0-3 in the final. And this guy, he had 14 first kills, and he didn't have the most first deaths or anything like that. He is potentially the best player in the whole of Valorant in terms of his mechanical ability and like the impact he has in the server every time he steps into the server is unbelievable. And it's part of the reason the Gamelanders has just been demolishing Brazil up until very, very recently, like the last month.
He had a 0.99 kill per round out of 142 rounds.
Yeah. I mean, that's freakish. He's a beast. But he really is just a nasty, nasty player. So the person that I picked for my duelist, though, because I hadn't picked anybody yet from North America, and so I was considering, well, okay, do I pick Shazam? But then I was like, okay, well, I can't really justify Shaz, I don't think, even though I want to give so much credit to Shaz for Sentinel's run through Masters and like how good he is at setting up that team system. I didn't think that Shaz was actually like the number one player from North America or anything. I suppose I could have picked Dapper. That was another great choice over in the Cypher role. But instead I went with TenZ because when we talk about duelists that are just out of their mind skilled, CNED's a great pick. MW's a great pick. TenZ, I think you've got to say, another phenomenal pick. He took a 2-month break. Wait, more than 2 months? Something like that. 2-3 month break, something like that. And he just comes back to competition and shits on everyone. He was, there were questions about how he would perform when he came back, but he didn't take a long enough break to drop off in any meaningful sense. He joins a team as a stand-in, and he's immediately the best player in the region again, just instantly. He demolished Baby Bay when they went up against FaZe Clan. Yeah, Baby Bay came back in the grand finals and actually had a pretty decent performance, but TenZ still did better than him. I mean, TenZ is, even if you play your best against him, he's almost always going to be the best player in the server whenever he's playing in North America. And I can't wait for people like TenZ to go up against people like CNED, against people like MW, and against another amazing shout, which I think is going to slip through the radar or through the net or under the radar when it comes to Masters, is Nookie. Because Nookie was unbelievably good, and he was still not the best player, in my opinion, in Europe. Like, Nookie, if he had been playing in any other region, could have been the best player in the region, arguably. I mean, it would have been tough if you're playing against TenZ or MW, I'm sure, but Nookie's versatility, what he's able to bring to the team in terms of his timing when he goes for pushes, information plays, but then still being able to pick up kills, multi-fragging. He had like the 6-man ace where he just goes boss mode and kills everybody. There are some freakish duelist players to pick from, and honestly, I could have gone with any of them. They're so good.
I think as well, when you look at Nookie, there's a part of me that also wants to highlight some of the other race players like Zipan that is just kind of was on that sort of level of, oh my god, world class, but has kind of fallen down a little bit. And I think that's more because FPX have got more of a team focus as opposed to a literal Zipan go kill. Sure. And obviously Zipan's playstyle suffered from that. What makes Nookie so good is he's still a team player and he still performs that well. The fact that he's still able to fulfill a role using his utility to clear angles, to use the boombot to clear an area of the map, yet still is able to blast back in onto a site and be the tip of a spear, is insane. But I think the coolest thing about TenZ is, so I've got like the individual ACS of each of the players on various agents, and TenZ is in the list for the top 10 3 times. He's first, second, and 6 when it comes to the ACS of like Reyna, Raze, and then Jett. And he played Jett more than the other two, to be fair, but the diversity of agents that he's good at, like, yeah, you can always go CNED is great, but it's always on the Jett. MW0 is great, but it's typically on the Raze. He played a little bit of Jett, as I saw, but he's not as known for that, right? So I think the fact that TenZ is just an all-round great player with very little practice on a team that they've barely been able to scrim on is super exciting going forward. I hope the Sentinels find a way and a bank, like we'll set up a GoFundMe or something to make sure that buyout goes through, because Lord have mercy, I need to see TenZ in Iceland at this point.
There might not be enough money in the world, Ryan. There might not be enough money in the world. Jack sat there on his pile of gold like Smog the Dragon, just raking it in.
Cryptocurrency is what we need. That's the next level to break this through. Usually we have like a 6th man or a 6th player. This is something that I didn't really think about, and it's not like I want to be like, oh, this player's from Japan who's good to sort of fill out the 6th man on the roster. Sure. But are there any other players that you feel, without this sort of region locking, and trust me, I really hate that word, but region locking that we've put on ourselves when it comes to players, that you feel deserves more of a shout out for the reasons that we've kind of mentioned?
I think I gave the shout outs as we kind of went along. But the number one that I was really disappointed to not be able to include in my personal roster was CNED. Like, it's the duelist that I feel that I've missed out on, because I've only included one of them, because I've included Stacks. It would be like CNED or MW or Nookie are the 3 names that I would be. In fact, you know, if I have TenZ already on my roster, then I'm definitely picking one of MW or Nookie, to be honest. I do not know who to pick between the two of them. I think for this Masters performance, I'll go with Nookie because I think that this is an excellent opportunity to give him props because during First Strike, it felt like he had a little bit of a feast or famine play style where the rest of the team was extremely structured and he was the only player, well, unless Nisao was in the team as well. But when they ran Nisao over on Sova and stuff like that, Nookie as the solo duelist was the only player that was free to take very risky engagements. And I think sometimes he hadn't quite found the right balance of that. And yet when this Masters came around, he had the perfect balance of that. Every decision that he made was timed impeccably based on what their opponents were doing. And even if he pushed forwards and only traded 1-for-1, the timing that he did it gained extremely valuable information for the rest of his team too. And that makes all the difference in the world. If you're just a duelist that's randomly pushing out on defense or out on attack and you trade 1-for-1, okay, you've got some value depending on whether you're attacking or defending or opening up an area. But if you do it at the right time to make an info play as well, which Nookie frequently does on defense because he likes to get aggressive whenever he plays the Reina or the Rays, you're doing so much more for your team. You're feeding that info back to Lowell and Rubino, who can process that and end up with Heretics coming with more and more wins. And I think, yeah, this Heretics team is phenomenal and has so much talent, and yet still I think is going to slip under the radar because everyone's going to be talking about like Ascend's rise. But with Heretics winning First Strike and then falling in 5 maps, incredibly close fashion, having multiple tournament championship points during Icebox, they deserve a lot of credit.
Definitely. And it's one of those more underappreciated teams for, I mean, you could make a literal video on the reasons why I feel Team Heretics get underappreciated. But for my 6th man, I think there's only one person to give it to when it comes to the narrative going into Masters. And this guy took the whole thing like a champ. Baby Bay just sneaked his way literally into the finals, but the fact that that's become such a verb and an iconic word to now use in the Valorant scene, it drummed up a lot of hype going into Masters 1. There was a lot of stuff going on at the time in the North America region, and it was just nice to cheer on somebody that was just taking everything in his stride. Of course, there's the whole Baby Bay aspect of his attitude and his persona, but you really do feel that he's just like a genuine good guy that's loving the appreciation. FaZe have been dogged on enough, so it was nice to see the whole team, but him certainly at the center of it, really rise to that occasion, play to their own strengths, show that Overwatch players, when playing in a certain style, could do quite a lot. I just think that was... Obviously, I think CNED's going to outperform him if you're looking at a Jett player to include, but I think what he managed to do and what FaZe managed to do going into Masters 1, even though they didn't quite make it when it came to as far as they could possibly go, they still did tremendously well and unfortunately fell against the likes of Sentinels. But what they were able to do for the whole narrative of esports is something that we're just never going to forget, and I think that deserves a lot of credit too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that FaZe has been a fantastic team, and it's a little unfortunate that they got 2-0, 3-0 when it came to their games against Sentinels, but that shouldn't make anybody lose excitement for watching them in the future and seeing whether they can rebound based on this. I know that Coach Trippy has been in my chat saying that they've got some extra stuff prepared for the future based on the fact that they lost these games. So I'm excited to see what they've got coming.
It just has a lot of good stuff. As well, we have like on the right-hand side, like overall picks where we kind of between us decide who should go in there. But I feel because of this, I quite like just sort of leaving the teams, even like in the comments to kind of go which team they'd prefer to sort of pick up. But
yeah, should we go for that? You have to leave a comment saying
naturally people are going to pick yours anyway, just because it's kind of like, the Sideshow stands coming out in full force. But the two scary teams.
I think that because you have 2 duelists that are just monster players, you could very reasonably literally just win the game with CNED and MW. That I think easily could overpower anything else. Plus, I think if my team was really a team, they'd be trying to play such a tactical style, and then with like stacks, and I don't know how that would end up working. It's a weird thought experiment if you ignore language issues, but it's a really cool one.
I just wonder who's going to be entering for your team, just because there's like they're all going to be trying to run past each other like 100-meter sprint to break on, like Angel's like shoving tens aside, like get out the way, I'm doing this. But like Kutch Baby Bay on the sidelines as well, cheering everybody on. But yeah, I mean, this was a lot of fun to do. It was really cool to do it through the challenges sort of stages. Hopefully we get to do this sort of more in the future. I don't know where it would be necessarily, but I wonder what people think of their teams as well, because I do feel that players like Glow, Chronicle, even players like Dapper are not going to be the names that people necessarily flock to when it comes to these guys were literally world class and are going to be on the list of like the HLTV top 20 players at the end of 2021, right? Like that's, I guess, the whole point. So it was super cool to do this. I don't know how we outro this one actually now.
Well, I'd like to outro it by saying that not only should you leave a comment saying which team you prefer, but if you think you can build a better team following the restrictions of only one player per region, but remember, you can use whatever regions you like. If you're a big fan of Japan, LATAM, whatever, go for it. And see if you can build a team that you think would beat mine and Ryan's team. And if you see someone else's comment that you think would actually beat them, give it a like, give it an upvote, and then we'll see which comments rise to the top. And I'll take a look at it, like a few days from now, a week from now, and we'll see whether that team, we'll probably bring it up on the next Plat Chat episode as well, and see whether that team really would, or whether you guys are just smoking some sweet stuff in the comments section. I have my suspicions which it would be. But yeah, if you're interested in checking out more of the videos like this, you can check out Ryan's channel that's in the description below. And if you liked this kind of content, we might make some more of these kind of style in the future. So let us know your feedback as well.
Bye.